In the basement of a closed seminary outside Chicago, I found a box that wasn't listed in any catalog, a plain wooden crate marked only with fattening blue ink. U.S. cases, clergy versus evil. Inside were transcripts, photographs, even audio reels stamped restricted, for ecclesiastical review only. Each file told of moment when the church stood against something it could neither explain nor control. 5 of them were different. 5 were never meant to be read together. Before we open them, subscribe, not to me, but to the record itself, because every time these stories are spoken aloud, something stirs. My name is Rebecca Winslow, a seminary researcher from Denver, Colorado. For 15 years I've traced the correspondence between clergy and the unexplained, collecting what the church chose not to remember. Tonight, we open 5 of the most disturbing reports ever filed on American soil, 5 real battles between the church and evil, where faith itself was tested. Let's start with the first one, the exorcism of Anna Eklund, 1928, Erling, Iowa. According to church records, her real name was Emma Schmidt, a quiet farm girl raised in a devout Catholic family who began showing signs of possession as early as 14. By the time Father Theophilus Reisinger, a Capuchin priest known for his experience in exorcisms, was called to her case, she was said to speak in languages she never learned and react violently to the Blessed Sacrament. In August of 1928, she was brought to a small convent in Erling, where the sisters cleared an upstairs room and barred the windows. For 23 days, the priest and several nuns witnessed what official reports later described as manifestations beyond natural explanation. They said her body levitated, that her voice changed into a chorus of men, and that her hatred for sacred relics was beyond reason. The church's own documentation, stamped, signed, and sealed, described the ritual as nearly fatal for both priest and victim. When it was over, Father Reisinger collapsed and wept, while Anna, pale and frail, whispered that she had seen the faces that hide in churches. Some say she lived quietly afterward. Others claim she never fully came back. But what's certain is that her case became a template for how the American church would confront evil for the rest of the century, through silence, secrecy, and faith tested to its breaking point. Let's move to the second case, the possession of Roland Doe, 1949. It began quietly in a suburban home in Cottage City, Maryland, when a 13-year-old boy started hearing scratching inside the walls. The family thought it was rats. Then the noise followed him, across rooms, across states, even into sleep. His aunt, who had introduced him to a Ouija board, died shortly after the first manifestations. Soon after, words appeared carved into his skin, and objects moved on their own. The local Lutheran minister, overwhelmed, referred the family to the Catholic Archdiocese of Washington, who sent Father William Bowden, a Jesuit priest, to investigate. The events that followed would later inspire The Exorcist, though the church has never officially confirmed the details. Witness accounts describe the boy's bed shaking violently, guttural voices echoing in Latin, and a stench of sulfur that filled the room whenever prayer began. The priests moved the boy to St. Louis, performing the rite dozens of times until Easter Monday, when the words Christus Domini reportedly appeared scorched into his skin, and the disturbance ceased. Decades later, one of the attending priests confessed in writing that he never stopped dreaming of that night, that he could still hear the boy's voice in his sleep whispering, "He's gone for now." Whether you believe the case or not, the church considered it genuine enough to seal every record, lock every transcript, and bury the names under the title that endures today: The Exorcism of Roland Doe. Let's turn to the third file, the haunting of Bell's Hollow, Tennessee, circa 1871. The report came from a Methodist preacher named Reverend Isaac Lemuel Johnson, a circuit rider serving small towns in the Cumberland region. According to his journals, something had begun to afflict his church after the death of a local farmer rumored to dabble in folk conjure. Parishioners spoke of pews shaking during sermons and hymnals turning pages on their own. The Reverend documented voices echoing from the rafters, some mocking scripture, others repeating his own prayers backward. One night he claimed, the pulpit itself cracked down the middle, and a black mist poured from it like breath. Determined to confront whatever it was, Johnson locked himself inside the sanctuary for 3 days with nothing but a Bible, a lantern, and water. On the third night, he wrote of hearing footsteps behind him that never left a shadow. When his congregation found him the next morning, he was kneeling before the altar, hands clasped, whispering a single line over and over. "The light is not always holy." The church classified his experience as psychological collapse, but his diary, now preserved in a private collection at Emory University, contains sketches of symbols later identified as early exorcism seals. It remains one of the earliest Protestant records of a minister, documenting direct combat with what he called, simply, the adversary in form. Let's move to the fourth file, the Smurl Family Haunting, West Pittston, Pennsylvania, 1974 to 1989. It began after Jack and Janet Smurl moved into a modest duplex on Chase Street, unaware that their half of the house had once been the site of a violent assault. Within months, strange noises echoed through the walls, banging, dragging, whispers that stopped when the lights came on. Appliances turned on by themselves. A dark stain appeared on the carpet no one could clean. Neighbors began to notice strange smells, sudden drops in temperature, and even shadows crossing the windows when no one was home. The church initially dismissed their claims, until Ed and Lorraine Warren, the famed Catholic demonologists, arrived to document the disturbances. Their notes described levitations, physical attacks, and voices mocking the family's prayers. At one point, a visiting priest attempted a blessing, only to have the crucifix torn from his hands. For more than a decade, the Smurfs lived under siege, enduring ridicule and skepticism while their faith slowly fractured. Church records confirm that multiple priests performed blessings and minor rites, though no full exorcism was ever approved. In 1989, the family finally left the house. The new owners reported nothing unusual. Some say the Smurfs invited the haunting upon themselves through fear. Others believe it never left the property, only the people. When I read their file, there was a note clipped to the final page, unsigned, written in typewriter font. "Faith doesn't always end the haunting. Sometimes it only survives it." And finally, the fifth case, the exorcism of Emma Schmidt, once known under the pseudonym Anna Eklund. Her possession in 1928 was considered one of the most well-documented cases in Catholic history. But what few people know is that, in 2012, archivists in Appleton, Wisconsin, rediscovered sealed transcripts from the Missionary Sisters of St. Francis, detailing a second investigation, not of Emma herself, but of the convent where her final exorcism had taken place. The nuns had begun reporting strange occurrences, Latin phrases echoing from the walls at dawn, the smell of sulfur, and statues turning toward the chapel doors during Mass. The local diocese quietly sent 2 priests and a lay researcher to document the activity. One of those researchers was Dr. Margaret Howell, a theologian and former seminary instructor, someone I personally studied under 15 years ago. Her private letters, later acquired by the university where I now work, mention nights when the air moved as if alive, and her voice recorder captured prayers spoken in reverse. The church never issued a statement, and the convent was decommissioned a year later. I visited it myself in 2019. Empty halls, doors sealed with wax, and an altar stone cracked clean through the middle. In the silence, I thought of Emma Schmidt's final words, written in trembling ink. "It was not me. It was waiting." Some say it ended in 1928. But every year, on the anniversary of her final rite, the chapel's bells ring once at midnight, though no one lives there anymore. For 15 years I've studied the places where theology touches the impossible, where faith is forced to stare back at the dark. These 5 cases, spread across a century of American history, remind us that the church's greatest battles are not always fought with armies or laws, but in the quiet hours of prayer when something unseen answers back. The records change, dates, witnesses, even doctrine, but one detail never does: the silence that follows when the prayers stop. Evil doesn't always wear a name. Sometimes it hides in the forgotten spaces between belief and fear, waiting for someone curious enough to open an old file or unlock a chapel door. And when that happens, the question isn't whether the church won, but whether the light was ever bright enough to see what it was fighting. I'm Rebecca Winslow, Seminary Researcher. And if you've stayed with me this far, remember this: faith is a shield, but history shows us it doesn't always keep the dark outside.